Module 9, fixed systems. Fixed fire suppression systems. This is what I used to do for 50 years. There's a lot of different on that one. So, objective, upon successful completion of this module, participants will be able to operate a fixed fire protection system safely and effectively. It's basically the same as JR's chemicals, your dry chemicals, your CO2, your inert gases. They all go into larger containers. You add pipe to them and add pressure to the cylinder so you can push it farther. The halon systems, when it discharges in a room, it has to be completely out of the tank, through the pipe, and out of the nozzles in 10 seconds. So a room like this would probably take about 1,200 to 1,400 pounds of halon to protect this room as a computer room. So this stuff flies out of the pipe. It's, I've heard it blow walls and stuff like that. But you have to do room integrity tests too on that. So, move on. Fixed fire protection systems, definition, types of fixed systems, system activation, and detection systems. Okay, so the definition of a fixed fire protection system is a thermosensitive device designed to react to predetermined temperatures by automatically releasing a stream of extinguishing agent. Components of fixed fire systems, you have the extinguishing agent, piping, storage tank, and system procedure for applying the agent. I'm going to pass this around, and it's a sprinkler head. What's one thing you don't want to do on a sprinkler head? Paint. That's the most thing. So you have a spur or a diverter on top. If it's flat, it's a pendant. If it's shaped with a bottle cap on it, it's an upright. Brings the water down. We also have sidewall nozzles on these. This one's 165 degree. This is your most common sprinkler head. This room has 165s in it. They're usually in normal hazards, it's 10 feet on centers. If it's hazardous, it's 8 feet, and if it's extra hazard, it's 6 feet on centers. The design of the sprinkler system, it has to be designed as if every head flows. So if every one of these were open, that's the design that you have to go to as far as how much water you need in there. And unlike the movies in Hollywood, somebody goes and pulls a pull station on the wall, it doesn't operate the sprinkler system. It just operates the fire alarm panel on that one. These would do that. On a big system, halon or a dry chemical system, we have pull stations, but it's marked. Pull here for fire in case the fusible links don't melt into. But this is the most simple detector here. And this one's a 1974. UL says you can use this for 50 years, and if you want to keep it, you take 10% of the sprinkler heads, send them to them to retest them. If they pass it, then you don't have to put new heads, but it's probably cheaper to put new heads in there. So it's basically a two-piece link with solder. This 165 is about 5 degrees either way, so it's 160 to 170. And when that pops, it just lets water out of that head. So in a building that's on fire, probably half of them aren't even popped because there's not having the heat under it to set these things off. So pass that around. Those are probably only about $20 a piece on those. Okay, different types of systems. We have water spray mix systems, which is like a cooling water on a spherical tank. And it's usually applied to special protection problems. Maybe independent supply for others. Some of them are automatic, some of them you have to turn a valve on, and you have a wide choice of nozzles. There's hundreds of nozzles for different things. In a Home Depot or a Lowe's, you'll see those EFRs. They're big sprinkler heads and they flow much more water, and that's where they put all their paint, all through the racks and all the way up to the ceiling. So that doesn't get away from it. That's where it helps. And then the sprinkler heads, it usually goes into the system. It's piped overhead. This room over here, jets coming out of, that's the riser room in there. That's where the water comes into the building. That's where you have your valves, your box, where you have all your replacement heads, and you have a wrench that you don't want to use a crisp wrench on because you can, that brass will twist off pretty easily on that. And they're usually activated by heat for fire on that one. So here's some of the heads. These are the frangible bulbs, and they're different colors. You have red or green or smaller and smaller, but the color determines the temperature. So you could look up there and you can tell which detector it is by the color of it, rather than go to it. This one's a pellet. You can tell this one's an upright. See how that it looks like a bottle cap? This one's a pendant. It hangs upside down. There's solder in between those two pieces, and they compress together, and when this yoke comes out, it goes off. This goes off by breaking the glass. You're looking at this one. See at the sidewall, the deflector on that one, it's that same fusible link by Roscoe. And then here's an upright also. Here's a frame arm, the valve cap, it's a 7/16 opening, and then you have the deflector on top, and that rolls it out, and there's a fusible link. In your hotel rooms, they put sidewalls in, they put signs on that says, "Do not hang your clothes here." Because if you knock that out, and it doesn't take much, it'll shoot about 20 feet out. So it's right by your door, and it shoots all the way to the window on those things. Here's an upright, you can tell by the cap, and that's creatable too. And then this is in a warehouse, you want to protect those. Because you knock them with a broom handle, it'll knock it out. And it makes a mess when it comes out. Why is it that water stinks so bad? It's the thread cutting oil that makes that water, it just sits there, and it comes out as black, and it stinks. But eventually it comes out clean, and it works on that. This is a wet system. This is charged all the way to the heads, and it's waiting for that. And then the next one of those, well, let's go over the OSMI valves. Here's OSMI. If they're in a system where you have a fire alarm panel monitoring, these are tamper switches where you can tell if they're open or closed. And if they're in the wrong position, they'll send a trouble signal to your fire alarm panel. And that'll be a yellow light on that. Here's the PIV valve. A lot of times they put those chains on, because if you move that valve just a little bit, there's a dot in that shaft to open that, and it'll put the fire alarm panel in trouble. Here's another PIV. They're all monitored. So in the control room, you can see if you've got water to use out there. And you're not just going to have to run out there and turn that on. So shut off water for the mains. Okay, big systems, sprinkler pipe. Standard pipe. Now they're going to groove fittings too. They're much easier to put together rather than threaded pipe. Okay. Pre-pipe water lines. A lot of times they'll take a building and have a computer design all the branch lines, and they'll fab it up and they put numbers on them, and they just put it all together. And used by occupancy and firefighters. That's probably the most dependable. As before, with all the hose racks, this isn't required because of the fire alarm systems that monitor your rooms and the sprinkler systems. Really, there's no use for a dry chemical extinguisher or water extinguisher in these. But these bin cabinets, even in the garage over by the Cavalry Court, all the parking garages, these are all gone. They have the 1.5-inch valve that you can hook a fire hose to, but those racks are they're all worn out. These hoses have to be tested every 5 years to watch the operating pressure, and where it rots is where the pins are racked up here, because it's just sitting on like a coat hanger on those. So you won't see that many, and then it damages the building, because if somebody's spraying that water and leaves it on, it's one thing to have it coming out of a 7/16 head, but 1.5 inch flow of water, sadly they're going away unless it's a special hazard facility. So this is a wet pipe system. There's a dry pipe system. Where would you want to use that?
Outside.
How about a warehouse? How about a dry dock or a dock outside in the winter, or you're a beast? You're going to have to need these. The dry pipe does not have water in it. What they do is they put a compressor in the station here out here where it comes into the building, and it keeps a constant pressure, and that holds the whole system together. It holds the clamp valve down. So when these heads pop in here, because it's a dry system, it would flow until the pressure kicked on. The valve opens and water flows, and it'll only flow through the head that's popped. Now, another system you may have, if you have loading terminals with 18-wheelers coming in, you're going to put in a deluge system. And the deluge system is one that all the heads, you knock the spur out of it, and they're completely open. The system just uses a detector to detect fire, and then that fires the valve open, and then the water goes out of every nozzle. You have to, these are hard to maintain because mud daubers, they'll nest in those, and you have to flush those probably every 6 months to make sure that they're not clogged up. Any questions on that? Then you have a pre-action system, and that is a dry pipe system. This is what computer room operators want because they hate the fact that all this water is hanging over all these computers. It drives them crazy on that. So it's a dry pipe, the fire alarm panel. If it goes into alarm, it fires the valve open, the water goes into the ceiling, and then you wait for one of the heads to go off. And when it does, it will just go off in the head that it came out of. So it's not a deluge. A deluge in French means flood. So that's out of all novels. And a dry pipe is going to make sure it only pops the head that's over the fire. Shutdown procedures. We'll go over one about how to put one in back and take place. Back in the day in the restaurant systems, when they used to have the good old animal pad that they as well, they used dry chemical powder systems in the vent hoods for fryers, stove tops, and basically griddles on those. It was discharged, and you put a fusible link through half-inch conduit, and it's one over each appliance where every ductwork, if it melts into it, fires the system off. In that, you want to shut off the fuel. That's major. So put a gas valve in that's pneumatically operated. When the system fires, it shuts the gas off, shuts the appliances off. It ruins that. But when they went to the wet chemical systems, you have water. You're spraying water on that instead of dry chemicals. So what you have to do is you have to put in a shunt trip breaker or a bypass, a contactor. You have to drop out every even 110 plugs underneath the vent hood where you're gonna have an electrical hazard on that. So these were a mess. Somebody set one off, shut a boiler up in that tower in downtown Dallas, that globe, and they had to run everybody out of the restaurant. You dump 40 pounds in a room or a restaurant there. So the restaurants have gone to the wet chemical, and it was McDonald's in Paris or France that they decided to test sweet vegetable oil to see if the dry chemical worked. Well, what happened is the dry chemical landed on that oil and it just sunk. So what they had to do is get an alkaline liquid instead of a light dry powder. And what that does, when it hits the grease, it saponifies into a foam layer. So you have like a meringue on top of that, and that shuts that down. Now you have to wait for that equipment to cool down. The fryer's on fire, it's about 500 degrees, but it auto ignites at about 375. So you have to wait for that to cool because it wants to reflash, so that meringue on top will let it cool down. And plus you dropping out the power too. You want to fight anything live on that one. I put in lots of foam systems. So you have to measure what water supply you have, supply the foam concentrate, suitable proportion, usually the 3% is the normal one. Proper piping. Foam makers either have, you can have high expansion foam, you can fill up a hanger in, or you can pump it through sprinkler heads. And they have listings for sprinkler heads that are used in foam systems. Discharge device, you can run it through a monitor to distribute the foam. My favorite was a high expansion. You know, see it fill up. We put in a hangar at in Florida for Arnold Palmer's aircraft out there, and the fire panel tripped. Somebody tripped it, and it filled it up to where you could just see the tail section sticking out of the foam. That messed up the paint job. But most of the other smaller ones you would just use in places where you have flammable liquor storage. A lot of warehouses, like the auto parts store, they'll segregate that flammable liquid area, and you'll have foam in that and just normal water in the other part of the warehouse. So they'll take off if they get rid of that foam. Total flooding systems. Probably the two that I'm thinking of are the inert gases CO2, or some of the gases like halon, FM200, WF1230. Again, the aerosols they have on that. Electrically, one thing, what is the worst system that you can put in that's a total flooding system? No? For life safety. Carbon dioxide. We breathe the same amount of fire, and what we need to breathe is the same. You don't go into a contained less than 19% oxygen. That's when the flame starts flickering. You start getting dizzy. When it gets down to 16%, the fire goes out, and so do you. So I put in several of these in potato chip plants where you have to have 3 types of devices to warn the people inside. We have a visual, which is a rotating beacon. Then we have these sirens that are good for 2 miles outside. People run out with their finger here. And then an olfactory sensor that when the discharge is fired, it crushes a capsule of wintergreen, and you smell wintergreen, and you see the lights, and then you go out there, and it's like you ate a whole can of snuff. But it fills up fast. It fills up fast. If there's a cloud, it starts at the bottom, and you only have to take 2 breaths and it's on. So we put a time delay on that. So when the fire alarm panel detects the flames, trips the system, those sirens and horns and lights, they go off for between 10 and 60 seconds to give people time to get out, and they have to measure that. And then the CO2 completely fills up the place. But they had 14 of the chip fryers, and they were less than 25 feet apart. So if one in the middle went off, I had to fire the ones on both sides of it so it didn't spread through that. But this operation is 24 hours a day, and it's just a big facility on that. But there was a lady at Wall Street in a bank. She went to the vault, there was a time lock on it. She couldn't get out of there, so she figured, well, if I pull this pull station, the cops or the fire department will come find me. Well, they did, hauled her out of there because she suffocated from CO2. So that's the one that scares the daylights out of me. Because when it decreases the oxygen, you get dizzy. But the ones that get around that back in the days of the computer rooms was halon 1301, putting a lot of those in. It's got the same setup, the detectors in the ceiling, the nozzles in the ceiling, but at about 5 to 6%, you could stay in the room and it would have the opposite effect, like breathing balloons, helium. It does the opposite. Your voice gets real low. It's like very light voice in there. So it's cold too. The room gets automatically cold. But that's a chain breaking reaction on that. Then they forbid halon, except for the U.S. military. Every military aircraft still has halon 1301 because there's nothing as efficient as that. And they're